Hi everybody, and welcome to the Introduction to Rescue Operations course. Emergencies happen every day. Nearly every emergency requires personnel and/or resources from multiple agencies. Rescues are a specialty call that requires efforts by personnel of numerous disciplines. With that said, not always are providers trained in roles to fulfill all necessities. Numerous times, EMS providers arrive on scene of a potentially dangerous call that's not exactly what they imagined. It's imperative that an EMS provider be cognizant of environments they may encounter. They may be diligent in recognizing and identifying a dangerous scene, know their limitations, and know what additional resources may be required and to what degree. In rescue situations that the EMS provider plays a direct role in, it is invaluable that the EMS provider know the operations that may ensue and techniques that may be done to most benefit their patient. This can play a major role in patient and rescuer safety and allow great collaboration amongst multiple agencies. Although the EMS provider's direct role in most rescues is very limited or non-existent, it is invaluable knowledge to know the basics of rescue disciplines and their capabilities. The objectives of this course are to readily identify hazards of a rescue scene, identify various rescue disciplines, readily request appropriate rescue disciplines at an emergency scene, know the EMS provider's potential role in each rescue discipline and their respective limitations, know the appropriate PPE for each discipline and how to don such PPE, and to know local, regional, and/or state resources for each rescue discipline. The rescue disciplines that we're going to cover, which cover pretty much all the rescue disciplines that are out there, will be vehicular rescue, rope rescue for both high and low angle, water rescue, swift water rescues, surface rescues and dive, confined space, trench, structural collapse, wilderness, and hazmat. As with everything EMS, one of your very first priorities is scene safety and that scene size up. So as you're approaching the scene, you need to be just like the Ghostbusters. And everybody calls it Ghostbusters because it's, well, who are you going to call? So you arrive on scene of a call that's not quite as it was dispatched, and now you realize you need those additional resources. So your BSI, scene safety, mechanism of injury or nature of illness, additional resources, and number of patients is your first priority and essentially your first assessment of each call. So when you arrive on scene, you need to be able to identify, if it is a rescue situation, who you need to call for help. Because, when John Doe Public calls into 911, they can only give them so much information and they may not always dispatch the appropriate additional resources needed. So you need to know the who, what, where, when, and how of the entire call, who you're going to call, where you might need to get that help from, how long it's going to take them to get there, and exactly what's needed to take care of this incident. Primary roles again. Your number one, as cliche as that ever is, that goes back in your safety. You need to value yourself as number one. Granted, yes, we're there to provide care for the patients and whatnot, but you're not going to be of any help if you endanger yourself. So that ties back into that scene safety. Your coworkers or your peers, they're number two importance. So you got to look out for the safety of yourself and those. And as weird as it may sound, your patient is the last priority because you don't want to endanger yourself or your peers into a situation, because then if you endanger them and harm them, they're not going to be able to go and benefit that patient any at all. And you must know the limitations of the role you're going to play. There are numerous instances every year of providers getting themselves in situations they are not trained or qualified to be in. If you arrive off the scene of an ambulance and there's a house on fire and somebody inside that house is on fire, do you have the appropriate equipment to exit off that ambulance and go inside to a burning building? Most likely not. So you need to know the limitations of that role you're going to play and exactly what your capacity is. You can't go into scenes and be wearing multiple hats. And with your BSI, that involves everything with your personal protective equipment, your PPE. There are very few forms of PPE that will cover a bunch of disciplines. As we've probably all seen, when the fire department shows up and they have on their gear, a lot of times that can be used for vehicle rescues, fires, hazmat. That's one of those uniforms and a form of PPE that can serve several disciplines, but that does not cover everything. There's still specialty equipment. As you see in the picture, you've got various rescuers and various types of uniforms. So each type of rescue discipline has its own form of PPE that must be worn to safely fill your capacity and your role in that rescue. Vehicle rescue is the most common type of rescue you're going to encounter. These happen every single day all across the country. So when you arrive on scene, your biggest priorities again is scene safety, de-energizing, meaning de-energizing that vehicle, which is simple things such as turning the vehicle off, taking the keys out, making sure that vehicle is not still under power to where you get into the vehicle and all of a sudden you bump the gas pedal and it takes off with you inside. Vehicle stabilization. Majority of cars are very stable when you get on scene, especially if they're still on all four wheels. But imagine you arrive on scene of a vehicle that's in a ditch on its side. If you go to try to enter this vehicle to help take care of the patient, you could put yourself in a dangerous situation if that vehicle isn't stable. You can enter the car and then roll over and pin the patient worse, or pin you and the patient, or just cause a very unsafe scene. Then after we've secured the scene safety, which encompasses de-energizing that vehicle and stabilizing that vehicle, then we stabilize that patient. Okay, so again, making ourselves number one priority, making sure that scene is safe for us to be in there and to operate. Then we go in and take care of the patient. And with that patient, we're also evaluating if they are entrapped, if they're just tangled, or if it's just simply an access problem, that you're just having a hard time to get to the patient or for them to get out. The most basic rule of vehicle extrication is try before you pry. So if you think this person's stuck in the car, you can't get them out, you're freaking out, try to unlock the door, see if you can open other doors before you pry and have to conduct full extrication with the jaws of life and all the other extrication equipment. PPE for vehicular rescue falls under NFPA 1951, the standard on protective ensemble for technical rescue operations. So it pretty much covers that you need to wear a helmet with appropriate eye protection, sturdy gloves, simple things such as mechanics gloves work really well, long pants, long sleeves, steel-toed shoes. So structural firefighting gear is okay because it's steel-toed shoes, long sleeves, long pants, and it's strongly considered to wear hearing protection because it can get very loud during extrication. So a lot of EMS agencies don't necessarily always carry this stuff, so but there are things that are supposed to be on every ambulance for helmets and approved eye protection. Even if there's the goofy lab goggles, that's still a form of eye protection. If you're out on scene and need a helmet to get into a car, I've seen numerous EMS providers ask to borrow a rescue helmet from the fire department to get in there to start taking care of that patient. So a helmet with eye protection, because there's dust, glass going everywhere, you got to keep yourself safe. Sturdy gloves, so if you even have to get in and get around sharper objects, put on your latex gloves or whatever kind of gloves your apparatus carries, and then you can put those mechanics or rescue gloves on over those. So that still gives you that barrier of bloodborne pathogen protection, as well as gives you a little bit more a thicker surface against sharps. And then those long pants, long sleeves, steel-toed shoes, And again, that structural firefighting gear is okay. There's identifying things that need to be considered when thinking about the safety of that vehicle rescue. So some simple identification things is here on the front of the windshield, just the windshield, is laminated glass. All this right here in the windshield is all laminated glass. And what that means is you have really small pieces of glass when it's broken, and the outside and inside of that glass are covered with a really thin sheet of plastic. So in the event of a vehicle accident and that glass breaks, that plastic keeps all the glass in place so it doesn't blow up in a bunch of little pieces and injure the occupants of the vehicle. So if that glass breaks, it doesn't fly into itty bitty pieces and go into the occupants' faces. Glass on the side here and here and back here is generally tempered glass. What that means is the glass is cured under heat, so when the glass breaks, it does break into really small pieces. So if you've ever seen a window of a house break, that glass breaks into really big pieces, really large shards of glass. So you can imagine if that were to happen in a vehicle accident, those really big pieces of glass could become impaled objects and really damage the occupants of the vehicle. So by design, all the glass is designed to break into really small pieces. And with it being tempered, cured under heat, it's extremely strong. So all these clips you see in the movies and TV shows of people punching out these side windows, that does not work. You cannot punch out one of these side windows. We had a student one time who was doing a vehicle rescue class, thought they were going to be like the actor on TV, punch a window, broke 2 bones in her hand. So you can't do it. It's not like you see on TV. Very, very, very strong stuff. Some other things to look for in your vehicles are such markings as hybrid. I think everybody's pretty familiar with a hybrid vehicle. It means it runs on fuel and electricity. So most of them from about 0 to 35 miles an hour, they're running on electricity. After that, they run on fuel to make them more energy efficient so they're not wasting a bunch of gas and stop and go driving. So think how that's going to apply to safety of an accident you show up to. If that driver of the vehicle is still freaking out, still excited they're just in a wreck and they've got their foot on the brake, the vehicle's still in drive, it's an electric motor because it's at standstill. So when you walk up to that vehicle, are you going to hear it running to know that it's still in gear or it's still running? No. Whereas a normal just gas or diesel vehicle, when it's running, you can hear the motor. Something else, and you see a lot of this commonly in our area now, especially if you see a plain white pickup truck with all the oil and gas workers, a lot of these vehicles run on compressed natural gas. So you'll see those as that's all placed in the bed of a lot of pickups, and it's also in some cars. Those are designed pretty safe, but it does have the potential if you come up to a vehicle and you hear a hissing sound that natural gas that's in there could be compromised and there could be a gas leak around that somewhere. Other markings such as eco, whereas some of the Ford vehicles are EcoBoost. There's these little eco symbols on Chevrolet cars. Most of the high dollar import cars all have this technology, and that auto start stop technology. So when the vehicle comes to a stop, the motor turns off because gasoline diesel motors, while they're idling at a standstill, they waste a lot of fuel. So it kills your miles per gallon. So they've been designed to, when you come up to a stop, the motor turns off. So if you see some of these indicators, it can help you elude that it's not just your standard run-of-the-mill vehicle that just runs all the time until you turn the key off. Other identification things to think about on the vehicle are the labeling of post. So it's just kind of the common terminology that's used. Is the post that holds up the windshield is the A post. So every post is connected up to the roof, goes in alphabetical order all the way back. So you see in this illustration you have the A post, the B post, and a C post. So if you think about a minivan, those can go A post, B, C, D, E, F, just depending on how big that vehicle is. So every post that separates a window that's a supporting beam goes in alphabetical order from the front to the back. With vehicle safety again, those key factors is energy of the vehicle, the surroundings of the vehicle, the stability of it, and resources you may need. So some energy factors is number one is airbags. These older vehicles, in the 80s, early 90s, some of these vehicles may have only had one airbag, and that's in the steering wheel. That might be the only airbag in that entire vehicle. Or some of the newer ones, you take a modern day minivan, those can have upwards of 30 airbags in them. So something we have to be considerate of, if you go to a vehicle that's newer and has airbags, they still have the potential to go off if they haven't been deployed during the accident. There are some cases throughout the country, they are rare though, of that vehicle being in an accident and while it's at a standstill, airbag going off. Most all the time, whenever a secondary airbag is went off after the wreck, that's during extrication where the car is being thumped against and banged against. It could cause one of these other airbags to go off. So be cautious of where they're at. You'll see these indicators, such as some older vehicles in the visor, they would have little airbag indicators saying that, hey, this passenger seat is equipped with an airbag. You see these on steering wheels and dashes along the post of a vehicle. You're going to see this airbag indicator, as well as some side curtain airbags, and the seats are now labeled with this, or you might just see this label here of SRS. SRS means a supplementary restraint system, which is an airbag. So those airbags can come out all over the place. They can come out of the post, the side post on the vehicles. There's A, B, C posts that support the roof. They can come out of the dash. They can come out of the seats. They can come out of right up above your head at the side curtain airbags, out of the steering wheels. Numerous places to come out. So in the event of an impact, there's big airbags deployed to make it cushiony so you don't bash your head off of metal or hard plastic or further injure yourself. The rule of thumb, kind of a safety consideration around those airbags, is you want to stay 10 inches away from steering wheel airbags if they haven't deployed, 30 inches away from dash curtain airbags, and 5 inches away from these side curtain airbags. So if you come up and there's already been all these airbags deployed, not as big of an issue. But the biggest ones in there is the dash, 30 inches from the dash, because that's a big airbag that comes out. So next we're going to watch a video on why airbag safety is so important and what the potential harm could be.
At that point, after removing the top, removing the door, we came to the interior of the car. We had to remove the left back front seat, and we cut that at this point here and here.
At this time, we decided that we had limited space to make a proper extrication of the victim in the back of the car. The car had struck a tree sideways, and the tree was literally positioned in the center of the vehicle. The captain of the rescue unit felt that perhaps it may be better to use the rescue unit's winch, which is positioned on the front of the vehicle, to remove the vehicle from the tree to put the vehicle in a position where we had more room to work on the extrication problem. At this point, we had a member of Truck 13 attempt to open the hood on the vehicle to disconnect the battery cables. However, with the condition of the vehicle, the hood had to be forcibly opened with a claw bar, and when the firefighter attempted to open the hood, it caused a lot of movement and discomfort to the victim. And at this time, it was decided not to forcibly open the hood, just leave the hood intact. We had the firefighter stand by with a CO2 extinguisher, and we also had an engine crew member on engine 17 standing by with a charged hose line. We are aware that the electrical system was intact. We didn't feel at this time that it was necessary to disconnect the electrical system because our primary concern was looking for it to be a possible hazard to fire. We weren't looking for airbags at this time.
I knelt down into the right front cushion. The console area being pretty well crushed in itself, it just took some minor hand tools to remove all the plastic outer components of the console area. We removed the lid, the inner basket, and the actual console housing itself. That left exposed a wiring harness and the hump, which gave me access between the seat cushion and the hump.
I came around this side because that side of the vehicle was fairly crowded. The tree being in my way, so this is as close as I could get, was to reach into here, and with each attempt he'd break some plastics and other parts off the seat and the console, so I was attempting to help clear the path for him to get a better vision on what he was doing.
Upon spreading the spreaders, I made 4 or 5 attempts at a point below a metal box, which was sitting right on top of the hump. 4 or 5 attempts, they had spread and moved the area a little bit, still not allowing enough room to remove the victim's feet. The medics cut his shoe off, hoping to slide his feet out from the shoe. That apparently not working. We made another attempt to spread it with the AMCA spreaders. At that point, as I spread the jaws, they came up into the side of the metal box. There was a sudden, tremendous explosion. I felt myself ejected from the car, violently propelled from the car, as a matter of fact, landing on my back. At that point, I had no idea what happened, whether the tool had blown up, the car itself had blown up. I never lost consciousness, but I became tremendously disoriented and experienced pain on my right side from my waist all the way up to the right side of my forehead.
Tom was operating the tool in there, and I was leaned over in this position as he's operating it, waiting to see if I could clear out more debris. And when he struck the box, this airbag deployed here out of the steering wheel, catching me in the upper chest and face, and kind of staggered me backwards. At the time I was struck, I didn't know exactly what had happened. All I know is that I felt something, heard a loud explosion, felt something hit my face and chest, and then I couldn't breathe. And so I didn't know if this was it or just exactly what had happened.
Oh my God, 2 of them are down, 2 of them are down, 2 of them are down.
Regarding energy in consideration of your vehicle or safety, biggest thing is to get up to the car and make sure it's in park. If there's been damage to it, sometimes it can just kill the motor and you can't shift it into park, and that kind of damage to the vehicle is probably not going to roll away. If you are able to put the vehicle in park and set the brake, so at least just make sure it's not in neutral, because sometimes people just put it in neutral too and it still has the ability to roll away. You can still at that point knock it into a gear, or worst case scenario, set the park brake on it. And try to make granted, we'll discuss disconnecting the power, but in a role of EMS doesn't need to come up and worry about disconnecting the power, considering disconnecting the battery. So disconnecting power to us is removing the keys out of the ignition, trying to make sure it's not going to re-energize. So before anything is considered of disconnecting the power, because a lot of fire departments, they get on scene, that's going to be their job, is to disconnect that power. So they'll come up and remove battery cables or cut the battery cables to try to kill all the power to the vehicle. A lot of record companies don't like those battery cables being cut because they want to be able to reconnect it and start the car, move it if they need to, where we want all the power cut just to make sure that we're going to be safe. So in the event, if the fire department's going to disconnect power, make sure that you use the power that's there for what you need it for. For instance, go ahead and move all those seats, because whereas most vehicles nowadays all have power seats, once that power is disconnected, you can't move the seats again. So move those seats back to give you all the room you need to access that patient. Roll down the windows Utilize all that power you're going to need to before they disconnect it. Also, while keeping an eye on all this stuff too, make sure that the orange wire is not cut. So in hybrid vehicles, there'll be an orange cable, and that's carrying thousands of volts of energy for those electric vehicles. Make sure that those orange wires are not cut. So some other stuff you're going to see for the energizing is where a lot of vehicles now have push start motors and they don't necessarily have a key it goes into ignition to turn off. So when you see the some of the indicators on those push buttons, if it's black, there's no power going to that switch, it means it's off. If it's blue, it means that there is power to it, that there's a door open, there's still some power getting to it. And if you see mostly red is, of course, generally a danger sign. So if it's red, that vehicle is still running. So you need to push that button, turn it off. Also, with that scene safety, thinking about the surroundings and other identification things. So you can imagine coming up on this scene and you see this tractor trailer overturned and you see all this stuff out here on the road. Okay, and you can see that there is this hazmat identification here, this hazmat placard, but with some of the damage and stuff, you may not be able to see what that is. So you may not be able to look into your books, see what the chemical is, and know if this is even safe to encounter or not. So that's something you really need to think about, because if you see this chemical here and a driver's over here and they're unresponsive, it could be because of this, not just necessarily because of that car accident. So the infamous saying is all fools rush in. So don't be that fool and rush into the scene and then create yourself to be part of the scene as another patient. Then you take this instance here of this vehicle. So imagine if there's still a patient in here and you need to get in there. Do you think this vehicle is really stable to be able to get up into? No, you've got other issues here. You've got power lines involved. Very dangerous. You've got this power pole here that's holding up the car, as well as some other power lines down here. Always assume that power lines have energy. Even if they're not sparking or anything like that, they can still become energized. So just the way those electrical wires run, if these wires get tripped, it generally cuts the power. But then where all the stuff's tied into computer systems, it might see that, hey, we had a loss of power, and then all of a sudden it might just try to send more energy back down that line to try to restore power just in case something happens. So always assume that these lines have power until the power company shows up and tells you that they do not have power. So avoid those at all costs. Make sure that you're not putting yourself into a dangerous situation just to be able to get in and try to render care. Next is consideration of stabilizing that vehicle. As I said before, if a vehicle is on four wheels, they're generally pretty stable. So stabilizing that is disconnecting the power, making it stable, putting it in park, or setting the brakes so it's not going to move away. Or if all else fails, try to find something to stick under the wheel, even if it's still in park, to put under the wheel so it won't roll away or move around. More advanced stabilization, even necessarily not even advanced, or say this vehicle on its side. Okay, you notice these jacks that are right here keeping it stabilized, because if you try to go in this vehicle and it's on its side and you're trying to move around, take care of the patient, the vehicle could be rocking to and fro, and even if you get inside, it could roll over even further and then further complicate your patient's condition. Also, the really simple things are these step chalks that are used. Okay. So these are just wooden blocks that are generally can be put under vehicles, like in the picture of this van over here. A step chalk can be put in right under that frame to keep that car from rocking from side to side just while you're in there moving around. Just kind of a really simple standard thing to do. Or we have ones in here that would keep that vehicle from sliding down the hill or prevent this car from being like a teeter-totter and rocking backwards. So make sure those vehicles are stable before you go and enter them. So terms that relate to those vehicle rescues is entrapment versus an access issue. So entrapment, that means the patient is stuck. There's parts of the vehicle that have the patient pinned from significant damage. So that could be, heavy damage has caused a dash to compress and it's got the patient's legs pinned, or the door is completely wedged and essentially broken to where the door hinges and stuff won't work and that patient is pinned in there. More of an access issue is the patient's just not able to get out because of compromised parts. So generally, entrapment's going to involve injuries. An access issue is there's just damage to the vehicle and the patient's stuck. They can't get out. So entrapment is more of an urgent care, where access issue, not as big of a deal. And that patient stabilization, once you've secured the scene, you've de-energized the vehicle, it's stable, then you can get in and take care of that patient. Patient care needs to begin as soon as possible, as soon as safely possible. So ASASP, if you want to get technical. So as soon as you can safely enter that vehicle to take care of that patient, you need to do so. If they do have spinal injuries, use a KED if that rescue or extrication is going to be prolonged and you have time to put it on. And try to protect that patient by using blankets, put helmets on them if need be, because during extrication it can get loud, dust can go, small pieces of glass can fly, so keep that patient protected from any kind of secondary injuries. So his primary injuries have already happened due to the wreck, but we want to make sure that the rescue and everything that's going on isn't going to make that patient's condition anymore. So get into that vehicle, start taking care of that patient as soon as you safely can, and keep them safe during all the rescue situations. Now we'll talk about rope rescue. Rope rescue is a very technical discipline. It requires a lot of critical thinking, a lot of pre-planning, and a lot of training to become certified in rope rescue. It is a prerequisite to pretty much every other single rescue discipline, such as confined space, trench rescue, swift water rescue, structural collapse. Pretty much all of them require that you have rope training, because that rope is going to be involved with most other rescue situations except vehicle rescue. It's the second most frequent rescue next to vehicle rescue. It can be something as simple as getting a rope over the hill, hooking to somebody for somebody to hang on to, or it can become very, very technical where it takes hours to make everything happen. So there's two basic types of rescue, a low angle and high angle. Low angle is the most common. That's where the real term for that is most of the weight of the patient and the rescuers is able to be maintained on their own accord. So you're just using a rope to kind of help keep you stabilized. So you can think of that as like you're going upstairs, there's a handrail to use. That's kind of the same concept that rope's going to be, just to help keep you safe and secure. Your whole life isn't hanging on that rope. Whereas in high angle, pretty much all the weight of the rescue is on that rope. So that could be you dangling in the air, which is most EMS providers you're not going to be doing, but that can mean that your patient is completely suspended and their whole life is hanging by that rope. This requires, high angle stuff is extremely, extremely technical and can oftentimes take hours to execute it properly. So one of the big time things is getting all this rope stuff set up. So in high angle, since that takes a while, you can imagine you might be having to do a lot of patient care while all the rope rigging as everything is taking place. Some illustrations here. As you see on the left, this is high angle rescue. See, this rope right here is holding on to this rescuer. He's not able to hold his feet up on the side of this cliff. His entire weight in the entire rescue operation is suspended by this rope. Whereas these over here, this is more of a low angle, because here's the rope, got the rope here, and everybody's able to stand up on their own accord on the side of the hill. This is just to help you, because you can see the patient in the basket over here. The rope would just connect them to help pull them up the hill, so these rescuers don't have to muscle everything. So these rope systems are a mechanical advantage to where, if you have a 200-pound patient, you may only have to pull 25 pounds of force on a rope to make that 200-pound person move, instead of having to just absolutely manhandle and muscle everything. Also, there's some really simple things. So you take this mechanism here, you've got a patient in a Stokes basket, and then you've got this ladder and the ropes going down it. So this can be just part of your device. So instead of having to lift them straight up in the air, you can put that patient on here, slide them up the ladder. So the big thing is you just got to work smarter, not harder. Use these rescue devices to your advantage to help get these patients up over a hill, down a hill, out of the condition they're in, so you're not breaking your back and overexerting yourself. So by the time you help get this patient up over the hill, then you give them the names, and then you're too wore out from having to manhandle them to take care of them. With PPE, basic things you're going to need to wear is gloves. Leather gloves is what is used. These leather gloves are not intended to be used in anything else. They're only to be used for that rope. So essentially the only thing those gloves should ever touch would be that rope. And that's because if you use those same gloves that are involved in vehicle rescue or different things, they can get oil, other contaminants on it, and any of that stuff that gets on the rope can reduce the strength of that rope. So extra special care is taken of rope to make sure it maintains its integrity. Then you're also going to need a helmet, eye protection, long pants, long sleeves, and a harness to tie into that. And depending on what the situation is, so for high angle rescues, you're going to need the upper part of a harness as well as the lower part. So if it's low angle and you're pretty much able to hold up your own weight, you're not going to need this top part, because this top part's going to help hold on to what's going to suspend you. Whereas if you're just tied into the rope for balance and security, you can use just the lower part. Some basic knots you need to know, and this will be covered in the face-to-face portion of the course, is the figure eight, the butterfly knot, and the water knot. And as I said before, the rope system is mechanical advantage. So here's kind of the basis of how rope rescues are set up. And all these there's several moving parts, several components in this. So you can imagine if you are help attending to this person. So you got a patient down here, and don't mind my terrible drawings, but here you are. You're down here taking care of this patient while all this rope rescue stuff is happening. Because you might be a rescue technician down here that's got all this rope assembled, but they don't know how to take care of this patient. So you might be down there having to take care of this patient while they're doing all the other technical stuff. So it's your job, to maintain your safety and your rescuer's safety. So that's why I believe it's essential to know what these parts here actually do. So this part here of the rope, this is the main lifeline of the rope. So this is going to take care, suspend all the way to the patient. This is going to essentially be the lifeline. Whereas you have other parts like this, these pulleys and whatnot, that's what's giving you the mechanical advantage. So if you've ever had a physics class, hopefully this makes sense, but if not, you've got different parts of the rope coming down here, then up to here, and then back down, and those angles and changing directions will give you that mechanical advantage. So where if this person's 200 pounds, these hands here, they're not pulling 200 pounds of force to make this person move. They're going to have a reduced load on there. One of the most essential parts of this is this right here, the anchor. In all rope rescue, we like to use what's called a bomb-proof anchor, to where it's something really solid, like trees, telephone poles, stuff that's really, really, really secured. It's gonna be hard to break. Most rescue apparatus, if they arrive and they're a technical rescuer, most of the apparatus they arrive on, they have rings and stuff that can be connected to their vehicle that the rope can be connected to, that's intended to be an anchor point. So if you see somebody trying to tie a rope system and anchor it to a door handle, a small twig, a stop sign, something that's not really secured, might want to just try to advise them that, hey, let's try to find a better anchor, especially if you as a rescuer can be down here tied into this system too. All the other parts in here are for the mechanical advantage. So just keep an eye on all this stuff as it's moving, making sure it's not going over rough edges, that nothing's going to damage those parts, the hardware of the pulleys or the software such as the rope, that nothing's going to damage those sharp edges, binds, twists, anything like that. Next is we'll go over some patient packaging stuff. So, patient's been injured, we put them all on a backboard. Okay, once that backboard, they're secured to it, then the backboard goes into a Stokes basket, as you see here in this picture. That mannequin is inside of a Stokes basket, which is made to hook to a system to haul them, lift them, whatever needs done. So they're secured to the backboard, and then they're secured to that Stokes basket. So this video is coming up next. We'll go over some one of the most common methods of how to secure them in there. There's multiple different ways, but this gives you a really good idea of how it's all done.
Alright, so what we're going to do today, guys, is do a little Stokes Basket 101. We're going to cover the 3 basic things you're going to need to safely package your patient in a Stokes basket, which is patient position, your knots and webbing, and then finally your pre-transport checks. We already have our patient in. We have them high in the Stokes basket, arms and limbs in. We have them high in the Stokes basket, so if we do a vertical haul or we're on a steep terrain, there will be a little bit of room for movement. So once we get that done, we can go ahead and start our knots and webbing. What you're going to do here for the bottom stirrup is you're going to measure the patient's foot, then buy yourself about an extra inch. And all you're going to do is just tie a simple overhand knot. Okay? Make sure it fits back over the foot, which it does. Next thing we're going to do is it's going to be either a girth hitch or a clove hitch to hold tension on the patient to hold them in the position in the basket. So I'm going to go ahead and tie a girth. Easy way to do that is put your loops through right here, then just pull the rest of your webbing through. You can also do a clove hitch on here, just anything that's going to hold tension on. Put that over the foot. Okay. Got that? Okay. And from here, we're just going to, just like lacing a shoe, we're going to do across the legs, making sure and staying on the high side of your bracket, so if there is some movement, the brackets of the Stokes basket will catch it. We're going to do across the waist. Sure, keep the patient's body parts in. Then we're going to do a last cross across the upper torso. Okay. Now from here, what we're going to do is go ahead and we're going to tie our trucker's hitch, take out all our slack, and the patient will be on their way pretty soon. So. Start. When you tie an overhand knot over here to make your clove hitch, it's best to put it a good distance down towards the side of the rail so you'll have room to pull. We'll just do one at a time. Okay, and I'll get my partner to help me take the slack out from there coming up. Got that? Okay. It's good to get your patient to take a nice deep breath so they'll have room to breathe. You'll pull slack, pinch that off. Okay, and then once you got that, then it's just going to be a simple overhand knot to lock that. And they're going nowhere there. We'll tuck our webbing in. Then we will repeat the process on the other side. Doing okay, patient? Yeah. Knock the slack out. Come here. Spinning on it. There we go. Got it? Okay. Yep. Deep breath. There we go. And just a simple overhand. We'll lock all this down, tuck the webbing in. Next thing we would do is check the patient. Is anything changed? Any better, any worse? Everything's the same? That's okay. If we needed to, we could take another quick set of vitals before we started to move. And if you did this properly, there should be minimal movement when we stand the patient up. So if we cover all our steps, then we will achieve our goal of getting our patient moved quickly and, most important, safely. Thanks a lot.
Next is swift and surface water rescues. These are relatively uncommon, but in recent years we've been having more and more natural disasters that have required the use of those specialty rescue teams, and one reason they became so publicized is the availability of such specialty things like this they're spread out pretty thin. Just because they are so uncommon, not a lot of places are equipped or capable of doing swift water rescue operations. So in the recent hurricanes, that's why you saw a lot of these rescuers from all across the country coming there, because a lot of local resources aren't able to do this because it's so specialty. So again, it's relatively uncommon, but in West Virginia it can be a little bit more common because we have the tourist attractions such as whitewater rafting in the southern part of the state, and some of the flooding that happened. A lot of those people who were trained in that had to travel far away to come to these areas to help do these rescues. It's highly dangerous and it's highly specialized, so these people have a ton of training to be able to go and do swift water rescue. And again, another reason it's so highly dangerous is because it's so uncommon. So you can imagine having to go to a call that you've trained on but have never went to a call in maybe 10 years to be able to go and do that. So they are very rare. Do not go into the water unless you have such training. Going into the water should only ever be done by people with sufficient training. So while operating ever near water, at a very minimum, you must wear a personal flotation device, a PFD. Anytime you're around any body of water, even if it's a pond, you need to have one of PFD. So if this means that there's water rescuers in a still moving or a still body of water and they're bringing you a patient and you're on the edge of that water, you gotta have one of PFD so you don't fall in and drown. In order of operations for rescues involving water, there is the reach, throw, row, and go. So reaching, that can mean that you're able to be on the edge with your PFD on and be able to reach out and grab them, or you have some kind of long object such as a long stick, a pole, something you can reach out to them and grab them and help pull them in. Throwing means that you're using a rope throw bag. It's a term used for rope that we use that floats on the water. It comes in a little bag, so you hold the loose end of the rope, you hold the bag in the other one, and you throw the rope at the person's head in the water. That's just a good aiming spot to be able to get the rope to them, and always throw it upstream. So if they're in moving water, that rope can be up, float down to them, they can grab onto it, and then when they grab hold of the rope, you pull them in. Other than that, to get into the water is specialized training. So the term of row is, you swim out to them or you row a boat out to them and you go in and secure the patient that way. Next thing is go. Go is that last priority, meaning that you are able to get out of the boat and you have to mainly be swimming in the water under your own strength, and tied to ropes to be able to go in and rescue that patient. And this is the reason why we don't generally want a lot of people in the water, because there is this term of the drowning machine. So if you've been to the beach, you've heard of the undertow, where surface water is moving one way and the undertow is moving another way. So if you can get in these low spots, there becomes turbulence in here. So this patient can get sucked under the water and just go in circles and circles and circles and never actually just continue to float downstream. Confined space, very uncommon, but it does have those instances of causing some significant issues. A confined space is basically defined as a space that is not intended for continual habitat. So that can mean, like you see in this picture here, there's a manhole cover, somebody's down in there, or a tunnel, someplace that's just not meant to occupy space. One of the biggest issue we have with that is the gases that build up down there. Since it's not meant to occupy normal space and it doesn't have generally one way in and a different way out, it doesn't get good oxygen down there. And also, like manholes and construction sites, a lot of toxic gases can build up down in there. So down in that hole you may not have much oxygen. So if you just see somebody down there and you try to climb down in, you could make yourself become a patient. Years ago, there was a story, I believe it was in Pennsylvania, of a man down into a low hole like this. So it was a little bit bigger. They're able to put a ladder down in, and EMS showed up and saw somebody down in this hole. So they got a ladder, climbed down in the hole, was trying to take care of the patient, and while they were down there, they passed out. So the other rescuers above were like, oh my gosh, we got a patient, and now one of our coworkers is unresponsive in that hole, have no idea what happened. So they try to climb down in that hole too, and eventually kept on and on until I think 4 people ended up dying from going down in that hole because of the toxic gases down there. So one of the most main essential things is air monitoring. Not only is it good for air monitoring to ensure the safety of those rescuers, it's also really good to know to do that air monitoring for, as a care provider, to know what kind of gases they may have been exposed to. So while those gases and air is being monitored, those monitors can tell you what exactly might be in that hole and how much. Hazmat is a low frequency call also. So as an EMS provider, your role needs to be to maintain the rule of thumb. So what that means is you take your arm, you extend it out in front of you, and you stick your thumb up. If your thumb can't cover up the entire scene, you're too close. You need to back away. At an absolute minimum, most hazmat scenes require you to be at least 300 feet away. So football field length away. You don't go in there. EMS is not designed to be in those zones at all. So you let the rescuers bring patients to you. If those patients have been exposed to hazardous substances, they must be decontaminated before you can transport them. Otherwise, you have a patient, they're contaminating hazardous materials. When they're in your ambulance, now your ambulance becomes contaminated. And when you take them to the hospital, you've now essentially contaminated that whole emergency room. So they must be fully decontaminated before you're able to transport them. And that decon, again, is done by hazmat teams. Wilderness rescue, in West Virginia, kind of more frequency, and it's a very seasonal rescue. So during hunting seasons, hunters fall out of tree stands, get lost. Those are generally the times of year when wilderness becomes a bigger thing. Otherwise, a lot of it is people who may have dementia go out for, leave the house, nobody knows where they are, and they go out and they get lost, or hikers get lost during the better seasons. But the largest frequency is during hunting seasons when those woods are more occupied. So some local resources, as you can see in this picture here, this is essentially an off-road ambulance that Marion County Rescue Squad has. Otherwise, other agencies have simple UTVs like Rhinos and Razors that they can go and take out into the wilderness, get patients, package them up if you need to, and be able to haul them out instead of trying to make a patient walk miles out of the woods. Or more simple things, just the use of ATVs. ATVs, UTVs are very abundant in the more wilderness areas, so those local resources are able to be used. Structural collapse, extremely rare. So you can imagine, not much you're going to be able to do with this. You're going to stand back, wait for patients to be brought to you. EMS has no role in functioning anywhere near a structure that has collapsed. So you're staying away and let the rescuers bring patients to you. Just, kind of have an idea of what's happened to them and think about in that structural collapse all the injuries and stuff that could occur. Trench rescues are extremely rare. These only occur a couple times a year nationwide. So a very special thing, and you can imagine if you see all the equipment that goes into this, all these struts, these boards, all this stuff here for air monitoring, all this stuff. So a trench is basically not supposed to be occupied either, so this is also essentially a confined space. So this takes an immense amount of time to get all these items set up in here to be able to try to remove somebody else. So again, the rescuers are going to bring patients to you, but consider and be asking those rescuers how they were entrapped, where they were, so you can get an idea on the injuries that may have occurred with that patient. But again, you're not going to be anywhere near this scene. So to be able to even operate, even on the edges of this, you have to have trench rescue training to even be anywhere close to this. So EMS, you're not wearing multiple hats, staying back, waiting for them to bring patients to you. Now with the use of air medical, if you're calling in a helicopter to help bring out that patient, or to transport them quickly and expedite their care, EMS does have a little bit of a role in this. Generally, EMS are not landing helicopters, but you need to know the safety operations of operating an LZ because helicopters can be pretty dangerous. So this little diagram here kind of draws out how these landing zones should be set up. So if you take this landing zone right here, this is supposed to be at a minimum 100 feet by 100 feet. And some agencies say they can land in smaller areas, and that's generally during the daytime. So during the nighttime, a lot of stuff has to go in here. So most generally these landing zones are going to be indicated by some lights that the fire departments will generally set up. So when a helicopter is coming in, they can see these lights where they're at, and there might be a secondary light out here that's going to help indicate the wind direction for that pilot. Also may have apparatus out here shining their lights out here into this direction to help illuminate some of that so those pilots can see. So if you're there in your ambulance, you need to make sure that all your flashing and strobe lights are turned off, especially during the nighttime. Because if that pilot's coming in and they're operating with night vision and stuff, those strobe bright flashing lights can damage the pilot's eyes and not allow them to be able to see to land. So generally let the fire departments handle setting up landing zones. They'll be illuminated so the pilots know where to go, and they'll be coordinated with whoever's the LZ coordinator will be talking over the radio with that pilot in the helicopter. So in an event when they do land and you have to approach that helicopter, there's some definite safety things you need to know about. As you see the arrow, you're only to approach the helicopter from the side. And this is only under the direction of the crew. Most of the time the crew gets off the ambulance or off the helicopter, comes to your ambulance to help take care of the patient, and then they themselves will just bring the patient back to their helicopter. Never just run up to a helicopter until the crew has offboarded or they have directed you to come towards the helicopter. And if you do, it's always at a perpendicular angle to the side. So only go in here to the side, straight through there. Don't walk up the side, because if you come up the side, these rotors back here are like a vacuum of death. They can suck you right in, chop you up, and there are cases of people being pulled into these propellers and being killed. Now, the blades of death up here is illustrated. These are generally pretty high. But just imagine if this is already, the helicopter's already landed and they're waiting for you to arrive. Don't pull close to the helicopter, because there are instances too of an ambulance pulling too close and they hit those blades, and the helicopter has to be inspected before it can take off, and it's deemed unusable. So only approach to the side under the direction of the crew. Avoid all these spinning, twirling things of death. Now, where to get the help that you need. So in our area in north central West Virginia, for air medical, you have HealthNet, Air Evac, Lifelight, some other agencies from HealthNet's based out of West Virginia, Air Evac, and some other ones can come out of Pennsylvania. But you don't get a pick. You just call for air medical assistance, and your dispatch centers will get you whatever they can get, whoever's going to be the closest. Rope, for the most part, most fire departments can handle basic rope rescues. So low angle rescue, most fire departments can handle that. High angle, being so technical, fewer places can do that. So a lot of times if you get on scene and say you need a high angle rescue, the dispatch centers are going to know who they need to call for that. Or the fire departments that get there, they'll know who they need to contact if they themselves need more help. Trench rescue, since it is so rare, Bridgeport Fire Department has a trench rescue team, and there are regional response teams. So, if in the event of a trench rescue happening in north central West Virginia, if Bridgeport's unavailable to come, that might mean your next trench rescue team comes from Charleston. Hazmat, again, most fire departments can handle basic hazmat stuff, but for very in-depth situations, it's going to take regional response teams, or some counties and some departments have larger hazmat teams that can be activated. Confined space, most fire departments can handle the basic stuff, but again, not all of them can. It just depends on their capacity. Like in most counties have about one department that can handle true lengthy confined space rescues. Vehicle rescues, pretty much every fire department are able to do vehicle rescues by themselves. They all have extrication tools, all able to do it, but depending on the severity of the damage and what kind of vehicle it is, say if a tractor and trailer has rolled over onto a car, that's going to take some specialty equipment that not every fire department has. Water rescues, generally those are county based. Some fire departments do have their own water rescue teams. Big thing is with all these things, being able to identify the rescue situation and be able to request what you need. And structural collapse, Bridgeport Fire Department has a structural collapse team. Otherwise, it's a statewide regional response team that may have to again come from Charleston or even out of state to be able to handle those situations. So the big thing is being able to readily recognize those additional resources and request exactly what you might need to be able to take care or rescue your patient. Call early, call often. It's easier to turn them around than it is to wait and delay care.